Good evening, welcome to All About Auckland. I'm Kane Glass. This week we're back at the Unitary Plan Hearings panel in 205 Queen Street. In this week's show we feature the rates debate, but first we go to the Unitary Plan Hearings panel for a look at the mana whenua submissions to the Regional Policy Statement. This week mana whenua presented in front of Deputy Chair Greg Hill. The usual cultural and heritage issues had an airing. The big issue this week that may see changes is around enabling greater economic development for Māori land in the region. Iwi want far broader powers to allow them to develop their land, well beyond Papakaianga housing rules that the present plan allows for.
Rest assured, we know these are hot seats. We feel it every day. We're here over the next 3 days to hear mana whenua issues in the Regional Policy Statement, and certainly from the Independent Māori Statutory Board dealing also with the issues. I'm the Deputy Chair of the Hearings Committee, so I'll be chairing the next 3 days of these hearings. My name is Greg Hill. Again, thank you very much for your welcome.
Bit of an introduction. You'll be aware there are 4 principal sections to this chapter. Some are shorter than others. The first, 5.1, deals with the recognition of treaty partnerships and participation, and that's the context in which a lot of the challenges to governance arrangements have been made. I haven't actually managed to get a total number of submissions on this chapter. I know what the total number of submission points is, it's about 1,600, but I don't have a total of actual submissions. I do know, however, that some 500 of those submissions were pro forma submissions, and many of them were concerned with governance issues, and those arise in the context of this first piece, 5.1. The second piece, 5.2, is about recognising mana whenua values by integrating Matauranga and Tikanga into the sustainable management of natural and physical resources. Not, as I recall, a highly contentious piece of the chapter, but nevertheless it is addressed by our witness, Mr. Smitheram. The third piece of the chapter is about Māori economic, social and cultural development, and that principally focuses on the use of Māori land within the meaning of the Te Ture Whenua Māori Act, and also treaty settlement land and the aspirations that Māori have for that land. It's a short piece of the chapter, and I've got a witness, Mr. Jim Clark, who will speak to that. I'm sure you've read his evidence. Probably the largest and most contentious component of the chapter is 5.4, and that's about the protection of mana whenua cultural heritage. There's a lot of submissions that have been filed on that.
A lot of the evidence being presented here, expert evidence, is actually from people who are concerned with 6F. It's historic heritage, it's archaeology. While it's linked, there are people talking about infrastructure. Infrastructure has its own chapter. Historic heritage has a chapter. This chapter is about Māori cultural heritage and protecting it, managing it, enhancing it into the future.
There is not a lot of Māori land in Auckland, under 1%. And interestingly, just picking up that last couple of points ago, the conversation, most of that land is in the rural and the coastal areas. It's already been stated numerous times this morning that Māori land is significant and special to Māori, tūranga waiwai, taonga tuku iho, and those philosophies and those principles have meant that what land is remaining is very important to Māori that own it. With respect to the Māori landowners, there are that look to utilise and develop their land. There are a sort of a Māori lens in the business protocols that if they do try and develop it, they look at intergenerational issues and they look at how they can look after and protect a lot of the values on the land, but more importantly bringing in whānau and iwi aspirations to what land is remaining. I think the key part of this evidence is really just highlighting that for a whole raft of reasons there are barriers to utilisation and development of Māori land. And these are mostly historical and in some cases unintended, but the reality is they are still real and they are there. And I think the big one is, and this is the unintended part, by creating individual title and then fragmentation of title, where people had choices to put their title down to, say, 10 kids, 10 kids, 10 kids. Over numerous generations, you could have a small parcel of land having hundreds and hundreds of landowners. And in the current day, it's meant in practice, some cases, there are a lot of landowners that are missing or no address, or you just cannot find, or have passed and not transferred that land on. So putting that together and looking at the topic today, in summary, when reviewing what rules and what principles should be applied to Māori land, they should be enabling to allow Māori to do what they want to do with that land, taken into the context of how Māori view land. And I think to some extent some of the measures that have been put in place, Māori precincts, Māori purpose zones and Māori land overlay, have provided some opportunity for development, but still coupled with the numerous obstacles. The overall reality is that if the panel and ultimately the council, when they implement and set up the new arrangements, they take an enabling approach to the use of Māori land. Kia ora.
And I guess the key point is that Māori land, treaty settlement land are different, and they're to be treated differently, and that's what King Salmon itself has expressly recognised in terms of Section 8. So in terms of giving effect to the NZCPS, it does have the directive language of avoid, but there are caveats to that, and that's again taking the language from King Salmon, recognising there are caveats, and Section 8 of the RMA was one of those caveats. So it recognises a different approach can be taken for Māori land and treaty settlement land, and that's where we say, retaining the word avoid, there is a basis for changing that, and the proposal has been to amend the wording in terms of the policies coming through here to avoid remedy mitigate.
At the high level, in terms of that policy and treaty settlement land, can you give us your opinion in the sense of, at this stage, nobody knows, well I don't think anyone, where treaty settlement land might be, and therefore there is effectively a policy in to allow development. So I wouldn't mind your opinion on that sort of somewhat, what we might call, say, blank sheet, and therefore in terms of the way the policy is framed, what sort of development do you envisage? Is it sort of development more generally, or is it development which is more associated for what you might normally think in terms of Māori development around Marae, Papakāinga and other cultural activities, or do you see it as something wider than that?
Well, in the lower order provisions, so it's actually speaking to those lower order provisions because it does have, there's Māori land and treaty settlement land. Yes, at the first step there are some permitted activities proposed at the moment, which allows for Papakāinga development, and notably within that is the density of allowing up to 10 dwellings at a density of 1 dwelling per hectare. So it's providing for that.
My evidence, a large part of it is about the meaning, significance and recognition of Māori cultural landscapes. Quite a number of submitters have opposed the inclusion of the term Māori cultural landscapes. Some go so far as to almost pretend that they don't exist. As I set out, and I provide a number of examples for that to show that Māori cultural landscapes overlie the entire region and in fact the entire country. I've set out the fact that Māori undeniably hold a holistic view of the natural and physical world and the nature of cultural landscapes. I mentioned that Māori cultural landscapes have been recognised in the region's planning documents for several decades, and increasingly by government departments like MFE, OTS and so on, and national heritage agencies. I believe that recognition of these landscapes is fundamental to achieving the policy intentions set out in the document. Second issue, I won't go in any detail about this, but it's long been recognised that Māori cultural heritage in the region's been threatened by development and growth, in particular in urban Auckland and on the coastal fringes, and association with major regional infrastructure development. In my view, this heritage continues to be threatened by incomplete recognition, as well as by inappropriate and largely ineffectual resource management mechanisms and processes. I've now been involved in promoting, advocating this issue now since 1982, and basically we don't seem to have gone anywhere. I mean, that's what I'm saying. We've gone forward, then we've gone backwards. I go on to note that Māori have become increasingly frustrated with it and disillusioned. I'm still involved regularly in resource management hearings, and Māori regularly say to me, why bother? Why should we bother? We're not going to get anywhere. And because their heritage is not out in the forefront, it's not recognised, so they have to almost ambush applicants and developers with it and watch as it gets dealt to. Second part there, I note that this is not business as usual. It's a watershed time for Māori in the region, the iwi agencies. We actually now have a government that's committed to advancing iwi. We have the Independent Māori Statutory Board, and we have the treaty settlement process. I set out the treaty settlements in some detail. I'll get at 5.54 in my evidence, so you understand the scale of it. But the detail of the treaty settlements is coming out slowly, but it has huge implications for this. I can honestly say if I was given time to work with iwi to develop a schedule, there would be tens of thousands of sites in it, without exaggerating. But what isn't being discussed is what those sites are, what that means. It's not all about protection, it's so often about just recognition that they exist. A precautionary approach, that is, as we go forward. If we go back to square one and leave Māori heritage out again, we're simply going nowhere, and that's just not going to take us into the future. Having said that, I see the provisions as being, and the word I would use, I was thinking about it this morning, is aspirational. They are aspirational. Yes, they are to some degree. I don't think the policy provisions are flawed, but the overlays and so on obviously need a lot of work. The need for infrastructure, it's a classic example where the need for infrastructure absolutely outweighed Māori heritage, because the Māori heritage was identified after the fact, because it wasn't out there. So I don't know if that's helped you, but if we carry on like that, that's what will keep happening. Māori heritage will keep getting rolled over. Landowners and developers will constantly strike uncertainty, but they'll have information given to them at the 11th hour, and no parties will be happy. We actually develop a schedule, an overlay of Māori cultural heritage sites, and it's a proper one. It will include all sorts of sites, and a huge number of them will just require recognition. I'll give you a quick example. We're sitting in a valley called Waihora-Tū, right? Te Araponamu track runs up beside us here to an old village site called Ngā Whārawa Tako, right? Now they're all under buildings, but iwi want them recognised, to be known about. Now what that might mean is what the council are doing. Their new building up in Albert Street is being called Ngā Whārawa Tako, that's all.
We've got the two schedules within the current plan, the 61 sites of significance, 3,600 sites of value. They are going through the process now, which is what this is. We're dealing with the RPS first, then we'll come to the rules. And the rules, which will look at the overlays, will provide the opportunity to look at those sites more specifically. The 61 sites, I think most of them actually come from legacy plans. The 3,600 sites is a new layer within the planning for Auckland, but this is the process for those sites to go through that process in terms of looking at those. In terms of other sites beyond that, they are the subject of work between council, mana whenua, which is occurring in terms of cultural landscapes. We've already had the discussion around alert layers. In order for those to be scheduled, they will need to go through an RMA process, and that provides the opportunity for interested parties to participate, landowners, etc. So that's the schedule process. I've talked about schedules not being determinative in my submissions, And that's a reference back to Section 6, for example, which recognises wāhi tapu taonga, those sorts of things. So there is still the potential for sites that are not scheduled at all to still arise in cases, and those are typically resource consent processes, notice of requirement processes. So those again provide the process to assess those matters.
On Guy Fawkes, the Budget Committee debated the rating scheme for Auckland. It was another messy debate. The Mayor had proposed a 2.5% increase in rates for the 2015 year. This proposal included a $3,000 lift in development contributions. However, the development community must have been in his ear, because at the start of the debate, he announced he was going to retract the $3,000 increase that he had proposed.
On reflection, the proposal to potentially lift the household per household contribution by $3,000 for DCs, we've reflected on that in the last few days, and we don't think that is the right thing to do. It doesn't reflect the development signals for Auckland, and it certainly would generate potentially some reactions that I think we would want to avoid. And what we've rechecked is that, does the legislation give us a clear pathway to adjust our DC charges by inflation? And we believe that's appropriate, and the framework is there now. There has been some doubt about that in the past, and that we should bring the non-strategic surplus asset sale target up, and that we would like over the next few months to work with local boards to make that more of a partnership process, where potentially we might come back and propose a way that we might share those proceeds to get more acceptance amongst communities that we can reinvest some of those sale proceeds back into local priorities to accelerate them. So this sits more comfortably, we think, alongside the 3.5, which does return more flexibility and capacity for investment at the local level.
As we've got down to the line, and particularly as the local boards have come to us with their concerns about where they think the savings that we've sought within our budgets have cut deepest, is in areas where in the community sometimes the demand has been the greatest. And it is clearly evident that, of course, everyone wants to pay minimal or no rates at all, but also they want a reasonably high standard of services in their communities. And anything that the local boards have had to say to us, or that's been said around this table about the types of projects that we want, no one disagree with. It's always about the timing, and it's always about the revenue levels, how much we can afford to do.
The office's proposal does not address the structural problem with development contributions, which is not just a 1 or 2 year issue. It goes forward into the future, because development contributions are a flow of money that happen on an ongoing basis from the development community. We know that even bumping up that does not materially alter the price of a piece of land, because the developers and the like will price the land according to what the market can stand. We know that. We all know that. We also know that if we do not increase the development contributions, that opportunity, that money that we could otherwise obtain to significantly increase the amount of parks and reserve space is gone.
The development contributions, which I thought we had actually agreed upon in terms of the workshops. I know no decisions made in workshops, but there seemed to be an almost unanimous feeling that in order to provide adequately for open space across the city in the future, that there had to be an alteration to what you had proposed, and I'm assuming now that we're largely going back, for starters anyway, to what you proposed in your proposal, which actually represented a reduction in the amount of money that was being currently collected for open space acquisition. So if I look at my notes, for instance, from one of the workshops, the open space acquisition and development in dollar terms had gone down in the North region, in fact more in the other regions, from $7,000 to $5,000 per unit. So at a time when we are saying that we need more open space, that Auckland's being intensified, you're actually going back on the money sum that actually makes that possible. We are reducing the amount of money to acquire open space, and we're flogging off the open space that the council currently owns. So how does that work? How does that make Auckland the most livable city? So I don't agree with that at all. That's a bit of a fast one, if you ask me.
We've got revaluations coming out, and we're staring down the barrel of a very low UAGC, and so there'll be a lot of households well above that regional rate increase of 2.5%, let alone 3.5%. And so this is not about preserving necessarily the likes of our wealthy. This is the likes of New Windsor, Point England, those that we've been told by officials their rates, their valuations have gone up 30, 40 odd percent. Their rates won't go up, but they can be rest assured that their rates will be well above the average rates increase of 2.5. So let's not penalise these people further by putting the regional rates increase up even further. Let's find the savings within.
I can't get my head around the way in which the development contribution charges are not increased when you cap rates at 2.5% 2015-16 and put them up to 3.5 for the following years thereafter. It just doesn't make sense. It does, because if you look at scenario B, you get out of the starters gate immediately at 3.5%, and then there's a proposal that there's a 16% increase in the overall development contribution. Now you can't have one and the other and argue this.
I think the proposition by the Chief Executive is a practical one, and I know I often use this kind of analogy. This is a bit of a everyone wants to go to heaven but no one wants to die. This is a slightly new take on it. This is everyone wants new parks, infrastructure, but no one wants to sell anything, put rates up or make the developers pay. So, you know, we live our lives between many rocks and many hard places. But I think we need to concentrate, and I just spent, together with the budget last night, reading the Productivity Commission report on housing, and I don't know if anyone can see, but that's probably the most telling graph that the government have produced, which is 48% of all the growth in New Zealand, the great big blue bit, their figures, not ours, is actually Auckland.
I want to go back and ask some questions, Mr Mayor, in terms of transport. All important transport, as you mentioned about no point in having parks if people can't get there. Transport was an important part of the political discourse for the last 5 years, and a key pledge in the Auckland plan, and that was to double or make best efforts to double PT by 2022 from 70 million to 140 million. We all know that Auckland has not been performing, and that may seem quite radical, but in terms of comparative cities, it's so-so. But for us, it's aspirational and transformational and something we need to do. What I'm concerned about when I look at the transport budget is that will not in any way achieve that goal. Won't come anywhere near it.
The development contributions needs, as the Chief Executive says, to be inflation proofed. We don't want to jump it up by a huge amount and fix line it. It's got to be steadily moved. And strategic alignment of our land holdings is only sensible. We have pockets of land that we don't need. We need to amalgamate some by buying a bit and selling a bit to fund it.
With the comment about everyone wants to go to heaven and no one wants to die. And the three things in line with that are putting rates up, selling things and charging developers. Well, this particular amendment ticks two of those three boxes, so I think we're off to a pretty decent start there. And I also note that you've said, Mr Mayor, that 2.5 isn't matching up with the reverb of what the community want, and we want to get the services that people are asking for. Well, my understanding is that we're going out for consultation. So why don't we go out for consultation with what you originally publicly proposed at 2.5 and then outline what we will and we won't get for that and let them decide. Exactly. That's what we're here for.
So I'm caught by surprise, really, because the whole way through any discussions that we've had have always been around a rate increase of 2.5%, an average of 2.5% for the first 2 years, then going out to 3.5. And you know that was only an average, and certainly a lot of wards would experience rate increases much higher than that. But under this new proposal, the 3.5%. I note that the Albert Eden Board, their residential rates, if I'm reading this correctly, and tell me if I'm not, but it looks like their rates will go up on an average, their residential rates will go up on an average of, if we continue with the $385 UAGC, their rates will go up by 12.3%.
I think the thing that makes me most frustrated here today is that what the hell have we been sitting here for the last 6 months in secret meetings debating when only, on the 11th hour, the real issues have emerged? Where has been the leadership for getting us to the point of understanding what is at stake? Has it just been the revolution that the local boards have put up? And I hope the local boards understand, even with option B, you are not having reinstated what you thought you had. Do you understand that? So you are being thrown a bone. You are not being thrown any meat.
So what I'm saying at this point in time, if I could find something to bridge that gap between 2.5 and 3.5 to address the concerns that have been expressed, then I would. But we don't have it at the moment. And you can't go to the community and tell them 2.5 and cloud cuckoo land about the rest of it. Send the officers off again. This is a political-led process. And what I want to do is to spend the next 8 months, listen to the community, get their view, we'll get it. And then try, as Councillor Wood says, to find the solution at the end of that period to a point where we can deliver on a lower rate increase than what is proposed.
Thanks for watching the All About Auckland show. I hope you found the ideas interesting. To watch the show again or to sign up for our newsletter, go to www.allaboutauckland.com. You can follow us on Facebook or via our Twitter handle, allaboutAKL. Next week we'll be looking at the rates cap. See you then.